Next, from the state capitol, Republican lawmakers hold a press conference to explain why they want a criminal investigation launched into how tens of millions of dollars were spent on a program that was supposed to combat neighborhood crime. This runs about 20 minutes.
Okay, thank all of you for coming out today to discuss and view the very disturbing findings of the audit of the Illinois Violence Prevention Authority. Just a little bit of history on this. Back in August of 2010, Governor Quinn gave the Illinois Violence Prevention Authority and Director Barbara Shaw the framework for a new neighborhood recovery initiative. 5 days later, he committed $20 million to this initiative, and 2 months later, in October of 2010, the governor announced the neighborhood renewal initiative and increased the budget to $50 million. And to put this really in context, it wasn't until the next spring during the appropriations process that we found out that this had even gone on. Many of the legislators in Chicago didn't even know it had gone on. And from the very beginning, it raised some very legitimate concerns about the program. Why was it put in place? The RFP process, the procurement process, staffing. How do you measure success? Really didn't have any answers on that. We cut the budget that year for that program, and come to find out in the appropriations process the next year in 2012 that the governor had, through his discretion, redirected money back into the program. So that year we really took a look at it. We shifted the program into the Criminal Justice Initiative, and we also introduced and passed House Resolution 1110, which directed the Auditor General to look into the Violence Protection Authority. So we're here today because of those findings. And let me state from the beginning, we were very, very concerned about how haphazardly and quickly this was put together. Different programs, different co-ops, different people putting things together to make it supposedly happen. And I think you'll see today in today's report that it wasn't put together right, that it was put together too fast, there was no oversight, and that it also raises the very strong suggestion that this program was initiated in funding just for campaign workers and to help with the re-election campaign that year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Senator Bivens.
Thank you. Hi, Tim Bivens, State Senator, 45th District. I was a county sheriff for 20 years. I spent 32 years in law enforcement. And quite frankly, if someone, an investigator, had brought this document to my desk and presented it to me, I would have called for a multi-agency task force to immediately start a criminal investigation. These funds that have been used, taxpayer dollars, there's no accountability. If you read the report, which I'm sure you will, you can see that 2 out of 23 sample providers had closed their doors. The funding that remained with those agencies never went back to Illinois Violence Prevention Authority. This is an ongoing pattern in this state. It's legalized theft, in my mind, of taxpayer dollars that go to programs. They take state and federal money and it goes to various programs that don't work, don't exist, close the doors, and nobody can figure out what happened to the money. So I believe that a criminal investigation should be started. You had money being spent for handing out flyers to go to wellness programs, to yoga programs, to field museums. You had people marching in a parade for the governor himself with tax dollars. There should be an investigation, ladies and gentlemen, and I trust that there will be. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm State Representative Dwight Kay from the 112th District, Glen Carbon, Illinois. In my days off from the Capitol, I actually run a very large corporation in the state of Illinois. And I would tell you that no corporation who wants to stay in business would spend money the way the governor has spent money with respect to the NRI. Put very, very bluntly, we have fleeced the taxpayers of Illinois with respect to the $50+ million that has gone to this initiative. Let me explain to you just exactly what's transpired here and what Representative Rice uncovered. 2 years ago in appropriations committees, we started asking questions about planning, accountability. Were people turning in time cards? Were people actually on the job, and what were they doing on the job? And the executive director of this particular initiative, this program, had no answers, not one. So what we have found today, and echoing what Senator Bivens just said, What we have found today is criminal activity. We find governor's initiative of $50 million going somewhere, but we don't know where, for something we don't know what. And we have no way to account now for funds expended. Let me just say this to you. It is no wonder that the state of Illinois is in the condition it is today, because quite frankly, when you give money away, as we have done here with no accountability, and move it in 2 months from a $20 million payout to a $50 million payout, you have to start asking questions, which we didn't do until 2 years ago. The bottom line is simply this. This is all politics. This has nothing to do about people and the betterment of the people of the state of Illinois. This is pure politics, and it's politics at its very worst. We have used taxpayer dollars in a wasteful manner, and as I said before, all we have done is fleeced the people of Illinois who work hard, pay taxes, and do the right thing.
Senator Matt Murphy from Palatine, and just to sort of follow up on what my colleagues have indicated so far. I mean, let's put this in the appropriate context. The governor is in a neighborhood in Chicago in mid-August 2010, looking at polls that have him down in the governor's race coming 2.5 months later by double digits. He's looking at a depressed base that isn't going to turn out, and he's going to lose this election. Now, you all down here know how quickly Illinois government moves. Molasses in July comes to mind. Government in Illinois can't get out of its own way, but they can find a way to come up with tens of millions of dollars from August to October. This program was set up October 6th. That's how quickly they got it moving when they wanted to get it moving. And they had tens of millions of dollars on the street by the November election. That, ladies and gentlemen, is taxpayer walking around money. And it's totally inappropriate, probably illegal. Pat Quinn fancies himself as a man of the people, a servant. We hear it in every address. But a governor who's really putting people first doesn't take tens of millions of their dollars for his own political slush fund, especially at a time when his government is hurting developmentally disabled and mentally ill in our state. Placing his own political career above the neediest among us isn't the act of a servant. It's just another example of the arrogant sense of entitlement that has steadily worsened throughout the Blagojevich-Quinn era of one-party rule in Springfield. The scandal, you want to know why people are so jaded in this state? Read this report. Read this. The scandal exposed in this report makes clear that Governor Quinn has broken the trust of even those who said, you know what, I don't always agree with him, but, you know, his heart's mostly in the right place. Was it here? Was it? Read the report. Can you honestly say that? This is another example of why it is well past time for us to get a new governor in this state. And I join Senator Bivens in calling on the appropriate authorities, starting with the Executive Inspector General, and then hopefully from there the U.S. Attorney's Office, to investigate this, because this is disgraceful.
Any questions?
Question?
How will things be different under Governor Rauner? The news release says that the governor broke the law by shuffling funds in the second year, I think. What was the law broken there? What did he do?
The finding was that discretionary funds were transferred from GRF to an appropriated violence prevention fund, and then a non-appropriated special projects. Basically, what he did was he created an off-budget slush fund that he interpreted to not require to be expended within a given fiscal year. He interpreted it as the appropriation authority continuing, and the the Auditor General here has indicated that that was not the case.
Matt, is there anything here that rises to the level of an impeachable offense,
control that, obviously, the Democrats do, but.
Well, I mean, I do think it warrants exploration. I mean, we want to be proper or prudent about this. I mean, the appropriate courses start with the Executive Inspector General. This is a damning and very thoroughly researched report right here. The Inspector General should take this and start to make assessments about whether or not that type of action is warranted. If this rises to the level of criminal conduct recognized by the U.S. Attorney, I don't know how you don't say it's impeachable. I mean, Governor Blagojevich was impeached. Some of the things he did were criminal, but some of the things he was impeached for were not. So this may very well rise to the level of being an impeachable offense.
Senator, you had a good laugh at my question, and I was only partially kidding. How prepared are the Republicans to run a clean government if even, Pat Quinn can't run one?
Well, I'm not here to speak for any gubernatorial candidate in particular.
You said we got to get
Absolutely.
out of there, and so now what?
Well, I don't recall an administration under Republican control that was as sloppy and as either of the two that the Democrats have thrown at Illinois ever since. Blagojevich-Quinn has been a disaster in every single way possible. Legally, from a policy standpoint, from an administrative standpoint, after 12 years of trying these guys, do I think we deserve a shot? Yeah, absolutely. And the reason is not for partisan politics, because I don't think the state can handle any more of these guys. Now, did Governor Edgar administer a better administration than these guys? Yeah. George Ryan went to prison. He went to prison for things he did when he was the Secretary of State. I don't recall people saying that he mismanaged the governor's office to the extent that these guys have. Jim Thompson, I think most people look fondly upon that era as a time when the state government was actually rather well managed. I can't think of anybody who would second the motion that Illinois government has been well run under the two Democrat governors who have had it for the last 11 years.
So what crimes were committed here and who committed them?
Well, I think that's going to be part of the investigation going forward. I mean, this is the tip of the iceberg, this Auditor General report.
Senator Bivens, you said it's indictable, what you read here. What are your?
I think what I was saying, this is the kind of information that indictments are made out of. Obviously, there has to be an investigation. Everyone's innocent until proven guilty. But there's also a thing called probable cause. There's more than enough probable cause here. When you use tax dollars to have people march in a parade for you campaigning, I don't think that's not only appropriate, may very well be illegal. So I think there's more than enough probable cause as you read this report for an investigation to occur, and the determination upon that investigation will determine whether or not charges are filed.
Do you have details on that parade?
There is video of that parade. It's been reported. So the information's out there, has been out there for quite some time.
Parade and the yoga and the flyers, that's part of the media report, it's not in this report.
Correct. That's correct.
How does it happen, whoever wants to answer that the state can spend $50 million without any oversight? What about checks and balances?
Well, the governor has the ability to move 3% of agency money around for emergency purposes. And, there's,
Did he authorize this as an emergency?
well, I don't know if it was an emergency. He might say it was because of so-called crime in the streets. I think you have to look at the crime then and the crime now. It didn't do a darn thing. But yes, the governor has the ability to move that money around. And, 3% of the budget isn't a lot, but more than what this here amount was. And I don't want to get away from the context of this report with criminal stuff and things, but there are some very damaging things here. These are Blagojevich actions that hopefully we learned our lesson from. Implemented a new program, no documentation to show how it was working. Did not do due diligence, the RFP process, timesheets were not constantly maintained. These are just basic things that we should have learned from the last administration that clearly weren't being done. And I also want to point out that the second year that we started really questioning Barbara Shaw on this, they filled C1 so full that the fire marshal came in. She was advocating, we got to keep this program, we got to increase the funding back to the way it was before. So not only were they doing this stuff beforehand, but they were coming back advocating for it to be done again. And that's a pretty disturbing pattern.
I can't imagine that the outrage is one-sided, though. I wonder if any Democrats would join you in decrying what's going on and embracing the results of Mr. Holland's report.
Well, the Speaker obviously allowed my resolution to go forward. He was in on many of the talks. If you remember back in 2012, we had a very hard time passing the budget that year. He okayed the resolution going forward. I think it passed 107 to 1. There were a lot of minority representatives that were very upset that they weren't given a chance to bid on these programs, and the programs weren't being implemented in their districts. So there was very much bipartisan effort in the audit.
Hey, what about here today? Did any of you ask any Democratic members of the legislature to join with you in condemning the way that state appropriations were being spent?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it's going around the Capitol pretty heavy, so they all know about it, so.
How about the next step? Do we go to the Attorney General and ask her, or do you go outside and ask someone like the FBI to investigate?
I'll let a lawyer answer that. Matt?
Well, the part of the issue is the Attorney General was in the oversight board of the Illinois Violence Prevention Authority when all of this occurred. So the reality of the situation is that's an inherent conflict for the Attorney General. That's why we are suggesting that we start with the Executive Inspector General, and that if there is an appropriate basis based on their finding, which if it's anything like this finding, I don't know how there wouldn't be, that it go from there to the local FBI office or the U.S. Attorney's office.
On a scale of severity, because a lot of people will automatically hear this and see a bunch of Republicans against a Democratic governor, that this is just pure politics.
Well, it's not our report. It's not our report. It's the Auditor General's report, and the Auditor General, is a Democrat. So this is no partisan witch hunt. Every once in a while, the truth comes out of this town, and I just hope people have the courage to look at it and assess what it shows.
Will you ask the Inspector General, or ask me your request from the Inspector General? Who's going to do that?
Yeah, there will be a request.
One other thing I wanted to point out in this report that I don't think we mentioned, because this was supposed to be for violence prevention. 7 of the top 20 Chicago communities for violent crime totals did not receive these funds. 7 of them didn't receive any funds. Aldermen were able to say where the funds go. It's all in this report. Again, this is and to answer your question about the partisan nature of this, when I was county sheriff, I called for George Ryan to step down publicly. So I view this from a different lens, perhaps, than others. I don't care who is in office, what title or name they carry, whether it's Republican or Democrat. I do care about good functioning government, and this is a repetitive behavior that continues. We've seen it with the Save a Life Foundation. We've seen it with other organizations. This getting of state and federal grants and then filtering out, and then we can't account for it anymore. You saw the FBI sting where several people were arrested in that for these $25,000 grants. This is a pattern of behavior that's going on, and it continues to go on, and I think this report points that out. Thank you.
Is that also, though, an indictment not just of individuals, but of the way the state is structured, and that there's not enough internal controls on spending or maybe legislative follow-up as far as government oversight to control this kind of thing?
I think, personally, I think there's plenty of controls in place, but not being utilized. I think people turn their heads, and when you have complete dominance by one party, and whether it's either party, you can control everything. And when you do that, you can turn a blind eye into these things, and we pointed this out in the Senate floor last year. I spoke on this, Senator Murphy spoke on this, others spoke on this Neighborhood Recovery Initiative. It fell on deaf ears. We still went forward with more money, as being proposed again, more money for these programs. And it's the new way. State and federal grants, you don't have to go out and run numbers or sell drugs. You just get these grants, and you can filter them out wherever you want to.
Of the $54 million, if I have the number right, is any of that yet to be recovered, or is it all been spent?
Good. Go ahead, Dave. Good.
Give me a second, Terry. Got it highlighted on the side. I believe it's somewhere around $2 million has yet to be accounted for because of the either unspent, the timesheets and the amount of staff don't match the money they were given, or they folded up and never returned the money. And you mentioned legislative oversight. This was never voted on by the General Assembly. This was implemented by the governor and funded by the governor, and we didn't find out about it until 6 months later. So this was never a program that was, debated and talked about in the General Assembly, nor the oversight.
So this goes back to my earlier question, maybe you already answered it. How does the governor, is it because the governor can move 3% of funds, or is he given a pocket of, like, is he given a slush fund within the budget that he can spend it the way he wants? Because I think citizens will hear this and go, how does that happen, that a governor can spend 50-something million without the legislature having approved it? As I recall,
It's the-
Governor Blagojevich was vetoed for spending money without authorization.
It's the ability to move money around. 3% of each agency can be moved around for so-called emergency purposes. And, it drives the people on the Appropriations Committee kind of crazy on both sides of the aisle that they have that power. Now, there are probably legitimate reasons why they may want to do that, natural disaster or something like that, but
Are any of you looking to offer a bill that would limit the governor's ability to move money around unless there was a recognizable state emergency, that he would have to have affirmed by the legislation?
I can't speak for everybody up here. I can't speak for everybody in this building, but, when does it come to an end that we have to legislate morality and ethical behavior? I mean, we might have a perfectly good governor 5 or 10 years from now that needs that ability. It seems like we always go back and try to fix some problem that someone did that they were probably taught in grade school not to do. When do we stop doing that?
Thank you.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.